Hey guys, this is Ross, and I'm going to show you guys the very powerful synth I like to call the square saw, because it's really just a square and a saw wave, and you can use it for a lot of things, but here's an example of me using it as a very strong, powerful bass. Here's what it sounds like. And here's a small sample of a project I've been working on. You'll hear it also as the lead too, so this synth can be used quite a lot for many different things, but listen and you might be able to hear it, and you'll hear it at the end of the video too. So here's what it sounds like. Right here. Okay, so I don't know if you guys could hear it. It's hard to hear it because it's a layer, but it's also like the lead too. So I'm going to show you guys how to make this really powerful combo and turn it into a lot of different synths that you guys can utilize. So the first thing that you need to do, file new sound always, and the first thing that you have to do is turn on two oscillators and make one of them saw. So we're gonna keep oscillator 1 as saw, and we're gonna take oscillator 2, turn this to square, and pitch it down an octave. Right there. And there you've already got the sound. Of course, there's a bunch of different cool things which I'm going to show you guys that you can do with this to make it a very, very important part of your synth bank and your database. So first off, I'm going to start with a really strong sounding bass. So I'm going to pitch these both down just an octave so you guys can hear it. So that sounds like a much stronger bass than just. So if we use these in conjunction, for some reason, I don't know, I just discovered this one day, the square saw combination just makes a really powerful sounding, kind of sounds like one synth of its own. And so if we go to EQ and turn the high shelf up to about here, and maybe the low up a little bit too, you get a really cool, really electronic sounding bass. I mean, it sounds really synthy and really digital. But obviously there's lots of things we can do to, you know, make it sound more realistic or more synthy if you want. And so the first thing that I would say to do is put on a daft filter. Turn the cutoff down, turn resonance to here, and put on envelope 1 and just turn it up all the way and just hear what you have. It sounds like it kind of sounds like a real bass pluck, like a electric guitar kind of bass too. So it's really a versatile sound for your bass sounds too. And so we can just play around with this, turn level down here, level down about there. That sounds like a pretty realistic sounding bass. But obviously if you want to keep things synthy, we can automate all these things with macro 2, up all the way and up all the way. And here's what we get. Oh, we should probably turn that down. That way we get, you know, the nice plucking sound that we always like. Which you don't have to have, obviously. You can always just turn this off. But it's nice to always have that option. Let's label this cutoff. And then another thing that we probably should do, if we're going to make this a bass, is we want to go to voicing, change this to monophonic, and leave this as always. And depending on if you want a lot of glide or not, for this I would prefer 0 glide, so I'm going to turn time all the way down. And we just use monophonic so that we don't play chords. So now what we get, we don't want to get any monophonic going or polyphonic going on, because that sounds bad. So, but if you want glide, you can turn this up. But I wouldn't. I personally, I don't really like it like that, so I'm going to leave it down. So now we have a bass going on. And there's a couple options you can go from here. You can distort it with Teletube. Obviously we want to automate Teletube so that there's not distortion with low cutoff. So if we turn cutoff up, the distortion is going to sound better. See? So if you can have Teletube, I like Teletube for my basses, or you can use an assortment of different effects. Like flanger can sound pretty good sometimes. Here, turn that down. So you can see there's a lot of different options to really spice the sound up. Although I wouldn't recommend chorus, reverb, delay, any of those kind of things that you would use on the lead. So I'm just going to leave this off. But here's an interesting one that I like to use is sample and hold for this one. Turn pitch up quite a bit, just about there, and turn dry wet to about here. And what this does is, if we turn the cutoff down a little bit here and turn resonance all the way up, you get some yaw sound going on. Obviously this is a more electronic and digital kind of sound. Personally, this is the kind of sound I prefer. I really like synthy and digital sounding synthesizers. But this is another option to make to spice the sound up and sound even more digital, is put sample to hold on here. And obviously you can kind of mess with some of the ones. Frequency shifter can give you some pretty cool sounding ones sometimes. Sometimes not. More often than not, it'll sound bad. I haven't really found too many uses for frequency shifter yet. I found a few, but it's good to mess with some of these. You know, shapers are really good, and the clipper are really good for distorting your sound even more after maybe a Teletube. But yeah, that's a nice way of spicing things up. And one more thing that I find really fun to do with this bass in particular is if we push these two oscillators up to filter 1 and turn resonance back down again. And we can use, turn this up to serial. We can use double notch filter and turn on. Turn resonance all the way down, and what you get is you get a phasing kind of sound. So if you don't want to use a phaser over here, or you want to control it more, double notch is a good filter to use to create a phasing effect without using these effects, and you can control it a lot more and control the resonance, which is really cool. So turn this to mix 2, but we don't want it all the way. I'll show you what it looks like with it all the way on. See, what you get is you get a phasing effect that you can control. So naturally, if we want this to sound like a real phaser, go to LFO 6, turn this all the way up. I found this works best with triangle rather than sine. Turn X fade all the way up to the triangle. Turn restart off. Turn on the mono, and turn the rate down, and you get a pretty realistic, cool sounding phaser. Just another really cool option that you can use to spice up this bass. But if you notice, if we use double notch, you lose a lot of volume. So, and you probably don't want all the phasing Just like with these phasers, you don't want to have it on full wet all the time. I mean, you might, but if you don't want it on full wet, you can use this mix, which is essentially the same thing as a dry wet, and turn the wet down a little bit to here. And so you can kind of hear it, but it's not sending everything through the filter, and you're not losing all of your dry, because you want to have some dry. And you can mess with the resonance even, which is essentially the same as feedback for these effects tabs. So this is really cool to mess with for this bass kind of sound. But yeah, there's so many possibilities. You can add another oscillator, you can put vibrato on it. There's just so many things you can do with it. And this is just the bass. So I'm going to start a new patch. And this is going to be kind of like for the lead sound, for like the higher kind of sound. Which all you have to do is leave the bottom one as we have saw square. Leave the bottom one 0 and make the saw always 1 octave higher. And now we have, you can kind of hear the combination of the square and the saw together. And it just generally makes a more powerful sound that you can make really strong chords with. That would sound a little weaker with just, one or the other. So the first thing that I want to do with this is I'm going to EQ the high up a little bit and the low a little bit down. And in my song I didn't actually use reverb, but just, reverb always makes these sounds really come to life. Turn the dry wet down a lot. And I mean, you guys can probably already see a lot of possibilities coming up from this. I like to put low pass 4 on here, turn that down, turn this almost all the way down, put envelope 1 on here, turn this down to about here, and automate it. And now what we're getting is it kind of sounds like a saw wave, but it's being backed up by the square a little bit more, and giving it a little more power, and kind of sounds more like an organ. So that's really cool for a lead effect. I'm gonna turn off the reverb for a more clean sound. Kind of reminds me of even Mord Fustang a little bit. And all the same things apply. You can apply the flanger, although I feel like this might be too high of a frequency for it to sound good. But let's just try it anyway. Feedback, depth down usually. Yeah, the frequency is a little too high for flanger. Flanger kind of gets in the way. But the other ones apply, like delay sync can sound pretty good. Turn these up to about here. So you can really just mess around with these different effects and see what you like. And honestly, I feel like you will find a lot of different effects to work out with this sound. But one in particular that I really like is vibrato tends to sound really cool on this one. So take LFO5, apply it to the pitch on both of these oscillators, and pitch it up 1. Turn the X fade curve up all the way. Jesus. Turn restart off and turn it on mono. Hit sync, and I like it at 116 or 1 in 12 is pretty good too sometimes. And turn the amp down to whatever point you like. And this kind of sounds like the bounce saw that I displayed at some point earlier, but it's a little more powerful with the square backing it. And so you actually heard it in my song, backing up this. It's on top of all the layers underneath. This is what it sounds like. So this sound can really cut through the rest of your mix if you leave it on mono. But sometimes it's cool to pan it left and right and make it a really cool mid. But I like to put it on top of everything and leave it as mono. And then of course you can turn this into a gliding lead. Turn this down to about there. Always is good. Again, it sounds really cool. But you can just kind of experiment with them, and even add oscillators on top. And it's always good for a mid or lead sometimes to add bright noise or white noise. I think white noise is better for this one. And I just like to put the same envelope I put on the filter on the noise too. And you can mess with the all these as well. I'm gonna show you guys one of my new favorites that I recently discovered, which is really cool for dubstep actually. But I like to use band reject, and I turn resonance up a little, turn cutoff to about here, and then just mess with the bandwidth. Actually, it sounds really cool if you modulate this. So you guys can see a lot of possibilities with this sound. This is kind of like the base of many patches that I will make if I'm not sure where to start. So it can be really cool to mess around with the square saw and just see what you can make out of it, because it's a really strong sounding patch before you even add anything to it. But yeah, that's basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you guys make a lot of use of this square saw synth like the way I do. But yeah, enjoy mixing.